Welcome to Monk's Temple. Let me ask you something that I used to whisper to myself at 3:47 in the morning, staring at the ceiling fan tracing shadows across the dark. If everything falls apart eventually, if every high is temporary, if every person we love will either leave us or be left by us, if our bodies are quietly breaking down with each rotation of the earth, if the very nature of being alive includes a non-negotiable line item of discomfort, disappointment, disease, and death, then why are we still here? Why do we set alarms? Why do we pay bills? Why do we show up to jobs that drain us, maintain relationships that require work, invest in skills that will be obsolete, plant trees we will never sit under? Why do we bother getting attached to anything when detachment is the only guaranteed outcome? This isn't a rhetorical question. This is the question. The one that sits underneath every ambition, every fear, every late-night conversation where the wine runs out before the honesty does. And here's the part nobody tells you about spiritual seeking: sometimes the answers don't comfort you. Sometimes they make it worse. Because when I first encountered the teaching that life is suffering, I didn't feel enlightened. I felt scammed. Like, great. Thanks, Buddha. Really glad I meditated for 6 months to hear that my existence is essentially a subscription service to discomfort with no cancel button. But here's what I didn't understand then, and here's what took me years of sitting on cushions and failing at mindfulness and crying into extremely expensive therapy sessions to grasp. I was reading the diagnosis as the verdict. So let's do something different tonight. Let's not rush toward answers. Let's not try to fix the problem of suffering like it's a leaky faucet we can just tighten. Let's slow down. Way down. Let's sit with the question long enough that it stops being an enemy we need to defeat and starts being a door we can walk through. My name is James. I'm not a monk. I'm not a teacher. I'm just someone who spent a very long time trying to escape the ocean by swimming faster, before I finally realized the water wasn't the problem, it was how I was fighting it. And tonight, from Monk's Temple, I want to walk with you into the heart of this ancient, urgent, liberating paradox, that the very thing we're trying to escape might be the only thing that can set us free. I want to tell you about a woman named Elena. Elena was a client of mine years ago when I was doing volunteer work at a community center. She was 73 years old, sharp as broken glass, with silver hair she wore in a braid wrapped twice around her head like a crown. She'd survived 3 wars, 2 continents, 1 husband, and an impressive array of medical indignities that she discussed with the casual detachment of a weather reporter. One afternoon, Elena found me staring out the window, probably looking as lost as I felt. "You look like someone who's trying to solve math problems with a spoon," she said. I laughed. "I'm trying to figure out what the point of everything is." Ah. She settled into the chair beside me with the satisfied creak of old joints. The everything question. I used to ask that. And did you find an answer? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I've never forgotten. "When I was young, I thought meaning was a destination. Like a city on a map. If I just traveled far enough, made enough sacrifices, endured enough hardship, I would eventually arrive. And then, finally, I could rest. I could stop searching. I could say, here it is. I made it." She paused, adjusting her braid with hands that had held dying children, buried friends, fled homes in the middle of the night. "But meaning isn't a city. It's the road itself. And I was so busy looking at the horizon that I never noticed I was already walking on it. This is what Buddha meant by dukkha. Not that life is an endless parade of horrors. Not that joy is an illusion. Not that we're all trapped in some cosmic punishment dimension. Unsatisfactoriness. That's the word. That feeling of almost. That sensation of reaching for something and coming up a centimeter short. That whisper in the back of your mind that says, this is good, but maybe something better is coming. This is enough, but perhaps there's more. This is nice, but wait until you get what you really want. We live our lives in the future tense. I'll be happy when I graduate. When I get the job. When I meet someone. When I lose the weight. When I buy the house. When I pay off the debt. When I retire. When. And then the graduation happens. The job materializes. The relationship begins. The weight comes off. The house is purchased. The debt is cleared. Retirement arrives. And we give it about 3 days, 3 hours, sometimes 3 minutes, before we find something else to wait for. This isn't a character flaw. This isn't personal failure. This is wiring. This is how the human mind evolved. Scanning the horizon for threats and opportunities, never fully settling, always alert, always anticipating. You can't outrun this by acquiring more things or achieving more goals. You can't purchase your way out of it. You can't promote your way out of it. You can't relationship your way out of it. The horizon is infinite. The reaching is endless. The hamster wheel has no final destination. And when we realize this, really realize it, not intellectually but in our bones, it can feel like discovering that the ladder we've been climbing is leaning against the wrong building. Or that the building doesn't even exist. Or that we've been climbing the ladder of a building we didn't even want to enter in the first place. So what do? Most of us try one of 3 strategies. The first strategy is more. More achievement. More acquisition. More optimization. We convince ourselves that we just haven't found the right combination yet. The right career. The right city. The right partner. The right therapist. The right supplement routine. The right meditation app. If we just try a little harder, tweak a little more, we'll finally crack the code and happiness will be ours. The second strategy is numb. We quiet the question with substances, distractions, productivity, scrolling, streaming, shopping, anything that keeps us from sitting alone in a quiet room with our own thoughts. We keep the volume turned up so high that we don't have to hear the silence. The third strategy is resign. We conclude that nothing matters, that it's all pointless, that meaning is a fairy tale we tell ourselves to feel important. We don't call it nihilism, we call it realism. We call it being clear-eyed. We call it adulthood. Here's what took me years to understand: all 3 strategies are the same strategy. They're all attempts to escape the present moment. They're all ways of saying, what's happening right now isn't enough. I need to get somewhere else, feel something else, be someone else. And the Buddha's radical, infuriating, liberating invitation is this: what if you stop trying to leave? Here's a story. A real one. A few years ago, I was walking through downtown Seattle during rush hour. You know the scene. Buses coughing diesel, people power walking with coffee cups like weapons, that particular gray drizzle that seems designed to make everyone slightly uncomfortable. I was in my head, obviously. Running through my to-do list, rehearsing a conversation I was nervous about, mentally composing an email I didn't want to write. And then I saw a man sitting on the sidewalk. He wasn't panhandling. He wasn't shouting. He was just sitting. Legs crossed. Hands resting on his knees. Eyes half closed. Rain collecting on his jacket, dripping from his hair, running down his face. He wasn't trying to get out of the rain. He wasn't hunched over or protecting himself. He was just there, completely there, while the city flowed around him like water around a stone. I don't know who he was. I don't know his story. He could have been mentally ill, chemically altered, spiritually enlightened, or just someone who was very, very tired. But I haven't forgotten him in 7 years. Because here's what I saw in that moment: he wasn't fighting the rain. The rain was falling. He was being rained on. And somewhere in that simple equation, there was a piece I didn't understand. That's when I started to suspect that the problem might not be suffering itself. The problem might be how I was relating to it. If this is resonating with you, if you've ever felt like you're running on a wheel that doesn't stop, or climbing a ladder that doesn't reach, I want to invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. Not because I have all the answers. I don't. Not because this channel will fix your life. It won't. But because these ancient teachings have something to say to our modern exhaustion, and because we don't have to figure it out alone. Hit subscribe. Join this community of fellow travelers who are also learning to stop running. Let's walk together. I spent 3 years thinking enlightenment was a finish line. I imagined it like a golden door at the end of a very long hallway. Behind that door was a version of me who never got angry, never felt anxious, never craved things he couldn't have. This enlightened James sat in perfect lotus posture, emanating quiet wisdom, untroubled by traffic jams or email inboxes or the existential dread of Sunday evenings. He drank his tea slowly. He never checked his phone compulsively. He was, in short, nothing like me. And this imaginary enlightened version of myself was very, very far away. So I did what any reasonable person would do: I started trying to close the distance. I meditated 45 minutes every morning. I went on silent retreats. I read Buddhist texts and highlighted passages and took notes in the margins. I monitored my thoughts like a security guard watching security cameras, ready to pounce on any sign of negativity. And you know what happened? I became a very anxious meditator. I was trying so hard to be enlightened that I was actually less present than when I'd started. I was constantly measuring myself against this impossible standard and constantly coming up short. Every moment of anger was a failure. Every craving was a setback. Every distraction during meditation was evidence that I was doing it wrong. It took a monk, a real one, not the imaginary kind in my head, to show me what was actually happening. His name was Ajahn Somchai. He was 78 years old, built like a gentle fence post, with a voice so quiet you had to lean in to hear him. I was at a monastery in northern Thailand, sitting in the outdoor meditation hall as the afternoon heat pressed down like a blanket. I had just confessed to him, in elaborate and slightly dramatic detail, that I felt like I was failing at Buddhism. Ajahn Somchai smiled. It was not a comforting smile. It was the smile of someone watching a small child insist that the moon is made of cheese. "James," he said, "you are trying to paint the ocean." I blinked. "I'm sorry." Imagine you stand on the shore with a tiny brush and a single drop of blue paint. You dip your brush. You touch it to the water. You believe that if you work very hard, you will eventually turn the entire ocean blue. He waited. I said, "Oh. This is your enlightenment project. You think the self is something you must perfect. You think peace is something you must achieve. You think there is a you who is not yet good enough, and another you who will someday be good enough, and the distance between them is the path." He picked up a handful of dust from the ground and let it fall through his fingers. The dust is already dust. The ocean is already ocean. You are already what you are seeking. You have just covered your eyes with your hands and convinced yourself it is nighttime. This is the enlightenment paradox: you can't become what you already are. Think about it this way. Have you ever lost something that was in your hand the whole time? I once spent 20 minutes searching frantically for my reading glasses while they sat on top of my head. My partner watched the whole thing without saying a word, which is either spiritual practice or excellent self-restraint. This is what seeking enlightenment is like. We're searching everywhere, in meditation cushions, in monasteries, in books by dead Zen masters, for something that has never been absent. We think we need to acquire peace, achieve presence, earn awakening. But you can't acquire what you've never lost. You can't achieve what's already the case. The Buddhist framework doesn't describe enlightenment as a destination. It describes it as a return. This reframes everything. If enlightenment is a destination, then the path is about accumulating something: more meditation hours, more insights, more spiritual accomplishments. You're a spiritual capitalist, investing in your practice and expecting returns. But if enlightenment is a return, then the path is about removing things, the habits of attention that obscure what's already here, the layers of wanting and fearing and grasping that keep us from recognizing our own wholeness. You don't need to become the ocean. You need to stop insisting you're just a wave. Let me tell you about my grandmother. She was not a Buddhist. She was a Methodist from rural Iowa who kept a Bible on her nightstand and a rosary in her coat pocket despite not being Catholic. She believed in God, hard work, and the healing properties of chicken soup. In the last year of her life, her memory began to dissolve. First it was small things. Where she put her keys, what day of the week it was, whether she'd taken her medication. Then it was bigger things, the names of her grandchildren, the face of her deceased husband, the layout of the house she'd lived in for 53 years. I visited her in the memory care facility 2 weeks before she died. She was sitting by the window, hands folded in her lap, looking out at a parking lot. She didn't recognize me. "Hello," she said, with the polite formality of someone greeting a stranger. "Lovely day." I sat down beside her. "Yes. Lovely." We sat in silence for a while. I was trying not to cry. I was failing. Then she reached over and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin, blue veins visible beneath the translucent surface. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You're sad," she said. Not a question. I nodded. She was quiet for a long moment, still holding my hand, still looking out at the parking lot. Then she said something I will carry with me until I die. I don't remember much anymore. But I remember how to be here. I remember how to hold a hand. I remember that the sun feels warm on my face. I remember that breathing in and breathing out is enough for now. This woman, who had forgotten her own son's name, who sometimes asked where her long-dead parents were, who couldn't tell you what year it was or what she'd eaten for breakfast, this woman was teaching me about presence. She wasn't trying to be anywhere else. She wasn't fighting her circumstances. She wasn't comparing this moment to better moments that had passed or hoping for better moments that might come. She was just here. Fully, completely, undefendedly here. That's what Ajahn Somchai was pointing to. Not enlightenment as a superpower. Enlightenment as a return to something so simple we've overlooked it our entire lives, the capacity to meet this moment as it is. There's a question that haunts everyone who takes these teachings seriously. If life is suffering, if attachment causes suffering, if the path to peace involves letting go, then isn't the most logical response just, checked out? Why engage? Why care? Why love, knowing love guarantees loss? Why hope, knowing hope courts disappointment? Why try, knowing trying doesn't guarantee outcomes? This is the question that almost made me quit Buddhism entirely. I remember sitting in my apartment, surrounded by meditation cushions and incense and all the props of a person trying very hard to be spiritual, and thinking, I don't want to be someone who doesn't care. I don't want to be so detached that I'm no longer affected by the world's pain. I don't want to transcend my humanity, I want to inhabit it more fully. But I couldn't reconcile this with what I thought Buddhism was asking of me. Then I met a woman named Dr. Anjali Sharma. Dr. Sharma was a palliative care physician. For 32 years, she had worked with patients who were actively dying. Not someday dying, we're all that, but soon dying. Weeks, days, hours. She had held the hands of people taking their last breaths. She had sat with families in the small, terrible hours after a heart monitor went flat. She had seen suffering in its most concentrated, undiluted form. I asked her, during a long interview for a project I was working on, how she kept showing up. How she avoided burnout. How she protected herself from the weight of all that pain. She considered the question for a long time. I don't protect myself, she said finally. That's the secret. I used to try. I used to build walls. I used to tell myself not to get attached. I used to think that if I could just be professional enough, clinical enough, detached enough, the suffering wouldn't touch me. She paused. It touched me anyway. And I was exhausted from fighting it. So what changed? I asked. The patients changed me. They taught me something I couldn't learn in medical school. They taught me that presence is the medicine. Not solutions. Not fixes. Not even comfort, always. Just presence. Someone who isn't running away. Someone who can bear to be there. She told me about a patient named Maria. 41 years old. Mother of 3. Ovarian cancer that had spread everywhere, metastasized beyond the reach of any treatment. Maria was not accepting her diagnosis peacefully. She was angry, righteously, magnificently, incandescently angry. She was angry at her body for betraying her. Angry at the doctors who couldn't save her. Angry at God, if God existed, for being either cruel or absent. Angry at herself for not catching it sooner. Angry at her children for having to watch her die. I sat with her for 3 days, Dr. Sharma said. I didn't try to calm her down. I didn't suggest meditation. I didn't talk about acceptance or transcendence or finding peace. I just stayed. I let her be angry. I let her scream. I let her cry. I let her be exactly where she was. And then on the 3rd day, she looked at me and said, "You're not scared of me." I said, "No, I'm not scared of you." She said, "Everyone else is scared of my anger. They try to fix it or make it go away. You just let it be here." What did you say? I said, "Your anger is part of you. And you are not a problem to be solved. You are a person to be accompanied." Dr. Sharma looked at me across the table. That's what Buddha was saying. Not that we should stop caring. That we should care differently. Not with grasping, clinging, desperate care that tries to control outcomes. But with open, steady, fearless care that can bear to be present with whatever arises. This is the compassion shift. Western psychology tells us that empathy without boundaries leads to burnout. And this is true, if by empathy we mean taking on other people's suffering as your own, merging with their pain until you can't distinguish theirs from yours. That's not compassion. That's fusion. That's drowning together. Buddhist compassion, karuna, is something else entirely. Karuna is the capacity to be present with suffering without being overwhelmed by it. It's not a wall that keeps suffering out. It's a deep, stable presence that can include suffering without collapsing. It's the difference between being in the ocean and being dissolved by it. You're still in the water. You can still feel the cold, the current, the salt. But you're not drowning. You're swimming. And here's what I didn't understand until Dr. Sharma explained it. Compassion isn't something you do after you've fixed yourself. It's not a reward for achieving enlightenment. It's the path itself. We don't become compassionate by first becoming peaceful. We become peaceful through the practice of compassion. This is the opposite of how we usually think. We assume that we need to get our own house in order before we can help others. We need to heal our wounds, resolve our traumas, stabilize our emotions, achieve some baseline level of okayness. Then, maybe, we'll have something to offer. But what if the house never gets fully in order? What if healing is endless? What if the wounds keep reopening, the traumas keep echoing, the emotions keep fluctuating? What if we're waiting for a readiness that never arrives? Buddha's invitation is radical: show up anyway. Not because you're ready. Not because you're qualified. Not because you've transcended your own suffering. But because your suffering and their suffering are not separate. Because the hand reaching out to help and the hand needing help are the same hand. Because compassion isn't a transaction between the healed and the wounded, it's a recognition that we are all, always, both. Let me tell you about the coffee shop. There's a place near my apartment called the Daily Grind. It's not special. Fluorescent lighting, slightly sticky tables, pastries that have been sitting in a case since yesterday. But I go there every Sunday morning because the owner, a man named Carlos, makes the best chai latte I've ever tasted and never rushes me out. One Sunday, I watched Carlos interact with a homeless man who had wandered in off the street. The man was clearly struggling, unwashed, talking to himself, agitated in the way that suggests either mental illness or extreme sleep deprivation or both. He wasn't bothering anyone. He was just standing near the door, muttering, rocking back and forth. I watched the other customers react. Some pretended not to see him. Others stared openly, phones half raised. One man gathered his laptop and moved to the far corner, as if discomfort was contagious. Carlos walked over to the man. He didn't ask him to leave. He didn't offer him money. He didn't preach or counsel or try to fix anything. He just said, "You look tired, my friend. Can I get you some coffee?" The man looked at Carlos like he'd forgotten what kindness sounded like. "I don't have any money." "Who said anything about money?" "I'm asking if you want coffee." A pause. Then, quietly, "Yes. Please. Black." Carlos brought him a large coffee, black, and a cinnamon roll wrapped in wax paper. He set them on a table near the window. "Sit as long as you need. Heat's on all day." Then he went back to wiping down the counter. I sat there for another hour, nursing my chai, watching the man slowly relax into his chair. He didn't leave for a long time. When he did, he left the coffee cup empty, the cinnamon roll wrapper neatly folded, the chair pushed in. Carlos saw me watching. He shrugged, almost apologetically. 33 years in this neighborhood. You learn that everyone's carrying something. You don't have to know what it is. You just have to not make it heavier. That's karuna. Not rescue. Not solution. Not fixing. Not even understanding. Just, not making it heavier. We are obsessed, in the modern West, with finding our purpose. It's in our job descriptions, our dating profiles, our commencement speeches. Find your passion. Discover your why. Live your truth. We speak about purpose as if it's a hidden treasure chest buried somewhere inside us, waiting to be excavated. As if the right career, the right relationship, the right creative project will finally unlock the meaning we've been missing. I spent 15 years hunting for my purpose. I tried journalism. I tried teaching. I tried tech. I tried writing novels that never got past page 50. I tried photography, pottery, a brief and regrettable experiment with urban beekeeping. I moved cities. I changed friend groups. I reorganized my entire identity every 18 to 24 months, convinced that this time, I'd finally found the thing I was meant to do. And every time, the pattern repeated. First, excitement. This is it. This is what I've been looking for. The honeymoon phase, when everything feels fresh and full of potential. Second, competence. I'm actually getting good at this. I can do this. Maybe I really am meant to be here. Third, plateau. Okay, this isn't as exciting as it used to be, but that's normal. Every job/career/relationship has its ups and downs. Fourth, restlessness. Something's missing. Maybe this wasn't the right fit after all. Maybe I need something else. Fifth, exit. Time to move on. Time to find my real purpose. Sound familiar? Here's what took me far too long to understand: I wasn't failing to find my purpose. I was mistaking what purpose actually is. Purpose isn't a thing you discover. It's a way you attend. Let me explain with a different metaphor. Imagine a lighthouse. Not the dramatic kind from movies, not a towering beacon on a storm-battered cliff. Just a small, steady light at the edge of a harbor. It doesn't move. It doesn't chase ships. It doesn't decide which vessels are worthy of its illumination. It just shines. Consistently. Reliably. Without preference or agenda. Ships come and go. Some pass close. Others stay far away. Some are cargo vessels, some fishing boats, some luxury yachts, some barely floating wrecks. The lighthouse doesn't judge them. It doesn't try to become a cargo vessel or a fishing boat. It just does what a lighthouse does, it shines. This is purpose. Not a specific activity. Not a particular role. Not a singular calling. But a quality of presence that you bring to whatever is in front of you. When Carlos makes coffee for a homeless man at 7 a.m. on a Sunday, he's not fulfilling his purpose in the way we usually talk about it. He's not checking a box on his life's to-do list. He's just shining. Being what he is, where he is, with what's in front of him. When Dr. Sharma sat with Maria through 3 days of rage and grief, she wasn't pursuing a goal. She wasn't measuring outcomes. She was just shining. When my grandmother, lost in the fog of dementia, held my hand and felt the sun on her face, she was shining. This is what Buddha was pointing to when he taught about right livelihood. Not that you have to find the perfect job that aligns with your cosmic destiny, but that you can bring the same quality of attention, the same steadiness, the same presence, the same care, to any activity. The purpose isn't in the what. It's in the how. Here's a story about dishes. I know. Everyone who writes about mindfulness has a story about washing dishes. It's practically a requirement, like a guitarist having a song about being on the road. But I'm going to tell you anyway, because this one is true and it wasn't a retreat and I didn't have any profound insights at the time. I was 27 years old, living in a shared apartment with 3 other people. Our kitchen was a disaster zone, crusted pots, mysterious Tupperware contents that may have predated the current decade, a sink perpetually full of dishes that everyone was waiting for someone else to wash. One night, I couldn't sleep. It was 2 a.m. I was anxious about work, anxious about money, anxious about the vague sense that my life was drifting without anchor. I walked into the kitchen, looked at the mountain of dirty dishes, and thought, well, I can't fix anything else. I can at least fix this. I filled the sink with hot water. I added soap. I started washing. Plate. Rinse. Rack. Bowl. Rinse. Rack. Fork. Knife. Spoon. The clink of ceramic, the steam rising, the transformation from greasy to clean. I wasn't meditating. I wasn't trying to be mindful. I was just washing dishes. 45 minutes later, the sink was empty. The counter was wiped. The dish rack was full of clean, gleaming vessels that would be dirty again by tomorrow evening. I stood there, dripping hands over the sink, and felt something I couldn't name. Not happiness. Not peace. Not enlightenment. Something simpler. I had shown up. I had done what was in front of me. I had taken something messy and made it less messy. It wouldn't last. It would need to be done again. And again. And again. But that was okay. That was the point. The point wasn't to get dishes permanently clean. The point was to be someone who shows up to what needs doing. This is the myth of the perfect purpose. We think we need to find the one thing that will make our lives meaningful. But life isn't one thing. It's 10,000 things, layered and overlapping and constantly shifting. The purpose that works at 25 won't be the purpose that works at 45. The purpose that works in times of abundance won't be the purpose that works in times of scarcity. The purpose that works when you're healthy won't be the purpose that works when you're sick. Purpose isn't a fixed point. It's a flexible capacity. And like any capacity, it grows through practice. Let me tell you about someone I never met. His name was Fumio Sasaki. Not the famous one, not the author of Goodbye, Things. A different Fumio Sasaki, an elderly man who lived in the Yanaka district of Tokyo and spent the last 30 years of his life sweeping the same 3 blocks of sidewalk. Every morning at 5:30, he emerged from his small house with a bamboo broom. Every morning, he swept. Rain or shine, cherry blossom season or typhoon season, his broom moved in the same steady rhythm. He didn't chat with passers-by. He didn't accept help. He didn't explain himself. He just swept. When a journalist finally interviewed him, at age 87, he was asked why he did it. The street was dirty, he said. Someone needed to clean it. But why you? Why for 30 years? A long pause. Then, because I am here. The street is here. The broom is here. What other reason do I need? This is the radical ordinary. We think meaning lives in the exceptional. The summit of Everest. The TED Talk. The best-selling book. The viral moment. The achievement that sets us apart from the crowd, that proves our specialness, that justifies our existence. But Buddha pointed somewhere else entirely. He pointed to the ordinary. The everyday. The unremarkable. The broom and the sidewalk. The dish and the sink. The hand and the hand to hold. Not because there's hidden glory in menial tasks. Not because suffering through boredom builds character. But because the ordinary is where life actually happens. Your life is not your vacation photos. Your life is not your career highlights reel. Your life is not the curated highlights you share on social media. Your life is the 5:30 a.m. alarm and the burnt toast and the traffic jam and the email you don't want to answer and the conversation with your partner about whose turn it is to clean the bathroom. If meaning is only available in the exceptional, then most of your life is meaningless. But if meaning is available in the ordinary, then your entire life becomes an opportunity. This is where the psychological insight meets the Buddhist framework. Western psychology has a name for what Sasaki was doing: flow. That state of complete absorption where self-consciousness disappears, time distorts, and the activity becomes its own reward. We usually associate flow with peak experiences, athletic performance, artistic creation, intellectual breakthrough. But flow is available anywhere. Flow is available in sweeping. Flow is available in dishes. Flow is available in the 1,000 small attentions that make up a human day. The conditions for flow are simple: a clear goal, immediate feedback, and a challenge roughly matched to your skill level. Sweeping a sidewalk has all three. The goal is clear, clean street. The feedback is immediate, you see the dirt disappear. The challenge is scalable. You can sweep mindfully or mindlessly, fast or slow, in patterns or random. Sasaki wasn't waiting for meaning to arrive. He was generating it, moment by moment, through the quality of his attention. This is what Buddha meant by mindfulness. Not a special state reserved for meditation cushions. Not a technique for stress reduction. Not a self-improvement project. But a way of meeting ordinary life with full presence. The miracle is not walking on water. The miracle is walking on the sidewalk, fully awake, with a broom in your hands. I want to tell you about the traffic jam. It happened on a Tuesday. I was driving home from a meeting that had gone poorly, stuck in standstill traffic on the interstate, watching the GPS estimate climb from 20 minutes to 40 minutes to an hour. My jaw was clenched. My hands were strangling the steering wheel. I was mentally rehearsing everything I should have said in that meeting, everything I'd do differently next time, everything that was wrong with my career and my life and the entire transportation infrastructure of this city. And then my phone pinged. It was a text from my sister, with a photo attached. My 3-year-old nephew had taken his first unassisted steps. There he was, mid-stride, arms out, face split open with the pure joy of a human discovering their own capacity. I sat in my idling car, surrounded by thousands of other idling cars, and wept. Not sad tears. Not happy tears. Just tears. Because here was this small, ordinary, miraculous thing happening in the world, and I had almost missed it. Because I was so locked in my own head, so convinced that my frustration was the most important thing happening on the planet, that I had forgotten to look up. The traffic was still traffic. The meeting had still gone poorly. The GPS still showed 40 minutes of waiting. But something had shifted. The container had expanded. This is what the radical ordinary offers, not escape from difficulty, but expansion beyond it. Not the disappearance of suffering, but the inclusion of suffering in a larger field of experience. The traffic jam and the toddler's first steps. The failed meeting and the sunset through the windshield. The frustration and the gratitude. All of it, together, simultaneously, undeniably, life. So if meaning isn't something we find, but something we practice, what does the practice look like? This is where Buddhism stops being philosophy and starts being instruction. Buddha didn't just diagnose the problem of suffering. He prescribed a path. 8 branches, interwoven, each supporting the others. Not steps to climb sequentially, but instruments in an orchestra, meant to be played together. Let me reframe them for you, not in ancient terms but in modern ones. First, understand the territory. Not as abstract belief, but as direct investigation. Look at your own experience. Notice the pattern, wanting, getting, wanting something else. Notice that satisfaction is real but temporary. Notice that you're not broken, you're human. This isn't pessimism. This is just accurate map reading. Second, clarify your intention. Not, I want to be enlightened. That's just another goal, another future destination to reach. But, I want to suffer less. I want to cause less suffering. I want to see clearly. Intention isn't about what you'll achieve. It's about what you prioritize. Third, speak with care. Not just avoiding lies, but noticing the quality of your communication. Are you speaking to connect or to perform? To understand or to win? To express or to defend? Words aren't just descriptions of reality, they shape reality. For yourself and others. Fourth, act with integrity. Not as moral rule following, but as embodied values. Do your actions align with what you claim to care about? This isn't about perfection. It's about noticing the gaps and gently, persistently, closing them. Fifth, simplify your life. Not deprivation, but discernment. What can you let go of that isn't serving you or others? What commitments, possessions, obligations are draining attention you could be bringing to what actually matters? Renunciation isn't about losing things. It's about freeing capacity. Sixth, apply sustained effort. Not grinding, not forcing, not spiritual materialism. Just showing up. Again. Even when it's boring. Even when it's hard. Even when you don't see progress. Especially then. Seventh, cultivate stable attention. Not as a special power, but as a basic skill. The ability to place your attention where you want it, and keep it there longer than 3 seconds. This is what meditation practice is. Not escaping thought, but relating to thought differently. Eighth, investigate directly. Not believing things because Buddha said them, or because I said them, or because any authority said them. Looking at your own experience with curiosity and precision. What is suffering, actually? What is joy, actually? What is this moment, actually? These 8 aren't a checklist. They're not a progression. They're not hoops to jump through before you earn the reward of meaning. They're descriptions of how a meaningful life operates. A meaningful life speaks carefully. A meaningful life acts with integrity. A meaningful life simplifies where possible. A meaningful life shows up consistently. A meaningful life pays attention. A meaningful life investigates. Meaning isn't what you get at the end of this practice. Meaning is the practice itself. Let me tell you about the teaching moment. I was leading a small mindfulness group at a community center. 8 people, all ages, all backgrounds, united by a vague sense that something was missing and meditation might help find it. One woman, Denise, was visibly frustrated. She kept checking her phone, sighing loudly, shifting in her chair. Finally, she interrupted me. "This isn't working," she said. "I've been coming here for 6 weeks. I meditate every day. I've read your recommended books. And I'm still anxious. I still snap at my kids. I still can't sleep through the night. When does this start working?" The room got quiet. Everyone was looking at me. I took a breath. "Denise," I said, "can I ask you something?" She nodded, arms crossed. "What do you mean by working?" She blinked. "I mean, I want to not be anxious anymore. I want to be peaceful. I want to be the kind of person who doesn't get triggered by every little thing. And you think meditation is supposed to give you that? Isn't it? I thought about how to answer. I thought about Ajahn Somchai, and his patient smile as I confessed my own enlightenment ambitions. I thought about Dr. Sharma, sitting with Maria's rage. I thought about my grandmother, holding my hand in the memory care facility, not knowing my name but knowing how to be present. Denise, imagine you've been carrying a heavy backpack your whole life. You don't remember putting it on. You don't know what's inside. You just know your shoulders ache and your back is tired and you wish you could set it down. She was listening. Meditation isn't someone taking the backpack off for you. It's not even a guarantee that the backpack will ever come off. Meditation is turning around. Finally looking at what's in the backpack. Recognizing each item. Understanding why you've been carrying it. And then maybe you decide you don't need to carry some of those items anymore. Or maybe you realize you can't put them down yet, but at least you know why you're still holding them. Or maybe you discover that some items aren't actually heavy, you've just been holding them wrong. I paused. This isn't a failure of your practice. This is your practice. The anxiety you feel, the frustration, the impatience, that's not evidence that meditation isn't working. That's the material. That's what you're working with. Denise was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, her arms uncrossed. So I'm not doing it wrong. You're not doing it wrong. You're doing it. That's the whole thing. This is what I wish someone had told me years ago. The practice isn't about escaping your experience. It's about including more of it. Most of us spend our lives trying to shrink our experience. We want only the pleasant feelings, the comfortable situations, the agreeable people. We push away the unpleasant, the difficult, the challenging. We construct elaborate avoidance systems, psychological and literal, to keep discomfort at bay. But suffering doesn't work that way. You can't avoid your way out of it. You can't outrun what you're carrying. The backpack stays on, growing heavier with each mile, until you finally stop and turn around and look at what's inside. The practice is turning around. Not once. Not twice. 1,000 times. 10,000 times. Every time you notice yourself running, you pause. Every time you catch yourself grasping, you open your hand. Every time you realize you've been holding your breath, you exhale. This isn't failure. This is the work. I want to offer you a different question. Not what is the meaning of life. Not what is my purpose. Not why am I here. These questions are too large. They're like asking, what is the ocean, while standing on the shore. You can't hold the ocean in your hands. You can't analyze it from a distance. You can only enter it. So here's a different question. Smaller. More immediate. More practical. What is needed right now? That's it. That's the whole practice compressed into 6 words. Not what will make me happy. Not what will advance my career. Not what will impress other people. Not what will look good on my resume or my Instagram feed or my annual review. What is needed right now? Sometimes the answer is obvious. A diaper change, an email response, a meal prepared, a friend called, a deadline met. Sometimes the answer is less obvious: a moment of silence, a boundary set, an apology offered, a forgiveness extended. Sometimes the answer is nothing at all, just sitting, breathing, being present. This question cuts through the noise. It bypasses the endless strategizing about the future and ruminating about the past. It brings us back to the only place meaning can actually be enacted: the present moment. Let me tell you about the sick friend. His name was David. We weren't close, more acquaintances than friends, people who knew each other through mutual circles and exchanged pleasantries at gatherings. When I heard he was hospitalized with a rare autoimmune condition, I did what most people do: I felt bad, thought about reaching out, and then got busy with my own life and forgot. 3 weeks later, I saw his wife at the grocery store. She looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. We talked for a few minutes. She told me David was stable but facing months of recovery. She told me their kids were struggling. She told me, in a voice that was trying very hard not to crack, that she felt completely alone. I went home and stood in my kitchen, staring at the wall. I had a to-do list. I had deadlines. I had my own problems, which felt very important from the inside. But the question arrived, unbidden, unwelcome, insistent: what is needed right now? I called her. Can I bring you dinner tomorrow? Oh, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. Can I? A pause. Then, quietly, that would be really nice. I made lasagna. I'm not a good cook. The lasagna was slightly burned on the edges and undercooked in the middle. I brought it over anyway. She thanked me, put it in the refrigerator, and we stood in her kitchen making small talk while her kids watched TV in the next room. I left feeling like I hadn't done anything significant. I hadn't solved any problems. I hadn't offered wisdom or comfort or even decent lasagna. But the next week, I brought soup. And the week after, I brought groceries. And the week after that, I sat with David for an hour while his wife went to pick up their kids from school. We didn't have profound conversations. We mostly watched bad daytime television and I tried not to stare at the four-drip. But at some point, David looked at me and said, "You keep showing up." I didn't know how to respond. "I keep showing up" sounded like an accusation or a question. "It's weird," he said. "Most people don't know what to do. So they do nothing. They're scared of making it worse or saying the wrong thing or intruding. So they just disappear." He was quiet for a minute. "You didn't disappear." I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. We watched a commercial for car insurance. The heart monitor beeped steadily in the background. This is what the question does. It doesn't ask you to be heroic. It doesn't ask you to have answers. It doesn't ask you to fix anything. It just asks you to notice what's needed and respond, however imperfectly, however inadequately. The burned lasagna. The mediocre soup. The awkward silence during daytime television. What is needed right now? Not perfection. Presence. So here we are. 3 hours, or maybe just 30 minutes, time is strange when you're paying attention to it, since we started this conversation. We've walked through ancient teachings and modern applications, through stories of grandmothers and hospice volunteers and monks who paint oceans. We've asked the question that kept me awake at 3:00 a.m. and found, perhaps, not an answer but a different way of asking. If life is suffering, what's the point? The point is that you're here. Not someday, when you've figured everything out. Not when you're more enlightened, more peaceful, more evolved. Now. Right now. Reading these words, breathing this air, occupying this impossible and temporary human body on this improbable planet. The point is not to avoid suffering. The point is not to transcend suffering. The point is not to find meaning despite suffering. The point is to live so fully, so presently, so attentively, that suffering becomes not an obstacle to meaning but part of meaning's very texture. The gold and the dross. The light and the shadow. The joy and the grief. Not because suffering is good. It isn't. Not because we should seek it out or celebrate it. We shouldn't. But because it's real. And reality, fully met, is the only source of genuine meaning. Let me tell you one more story. This morning, I walked to the park near my apartment. It was early, just after sunrise, and the light was doing that thing it does in autumn, golden, slanted, soft. The grass was wet with dew. A heron stood motionless at the edge of the pond, waiting for fish that might or might not appear. I sat on a bench and watched the heron for 20 minutes. I didn't meditate. I didn't practice mindfulness. I didn't try to extract a lesson or find a metaphor or achieve any particular state of consciousness. I just watched. The heron stood. The light shifted. The city woke up in the distance, the first buses rumbling, the first cars merging onto the freeway. And at some point, without any dramatic revelation, I felt something settle. Not happiness. Not peace. Not enlightenment. Just enough. This moment, ordinary in every way. This bench, slightly damp from the morning dew. This heron, still as stone. This breath, entering and leaving. This life, happening now, exactly as it is. The point isn't to find meaning. The point is to recognize that meaning isn't lost. It's been here the whole time, waiting for you to stop looking past it. This is the Buddha's life-changing answer. Not a doctrine to believe. Not a destination to reach. Not a secret to unlock. An invitation. To stop running. To stop grasping. To stop fighting. To sit on the damp bench and watch the heron. To wash the dishes and feel the warm water. To hold the hand of someone who's suffering and let that be enough. To be fully, completely, undefendedly here, not someday, but now. Not because you've figured everything out. Not because you've transcended your humanity. Not because you've escaped suffering. But because this is your life. This one, singular, irreplaceable life. And it's happening now, while you're making other plans. My name is James. This is Monk's Temple. We don't have answers here. We don't have secrets. We don't have maps to buried treasure or formulas for guaranteed happiness. What we have is this, a community of people who are learning, slowly and imperfectly, to stop running. To turn toward their experience rather than away from it. To show up for each other and for themselves. If that sounds like something you need, hit subscribe. Not because this channel will fix you. Not because I have anything figured out. But because we don't have to do this alone. Because the practice of presence is sustained in community. Because every time you show up to pay attention, you make it a little easier for someone else to do the same. And if you're willing, drop a comment. Tell me about the heron in your life. The ordinary moment that became extraordinary because you were fully there for it. The small practice of presence you're cultivating. The question you're still carrying. We're walking this path together. Until next time, breathe. Notice. Show up. The point isn't somewhere else. The point is here. Welcome to Monk's Temple.